Welcome to the Millennial Body Image Project. We're two licensed dietitian nutritionists bringing you conversations that cut through the food noise, debunk wellness trends, and remind you that it's not you, it's the systems stacked against you.
Together, we'll explore the struggles so many of us carry, challenge the fear-mongering that fuels them, and offer evidence-based, compassionate tools to support your body on its own terms.
Because your lived experience matters, and your body is not the problem. All right, welcome back to part 2 of the food noise episode series. And if you weren't listening or you're catching up and you're new this week, it's okay. You don't have to stop what you're listening to and go back to last week, but you might want to go back to the last episode and listen because all the last episode was all about where food noise is coming from. Why is this like a new term that's everywhere? And should we care? Should we not care? Why is this happening? And is it even a problem? But for today's episode, what we really wanted to talk to you about and what you wanted you to lead with today is really understanding the language of your body. Our food noise and all this information is just that. It's information. It's our body talking to us. And what feels overwhelming, I believe, about food noise is that when we don't know how to respond to it, it can feel very disorienting and feeling very overwhelmed and feel like this thing that we want to say, okay, shut up, mind. I don't want to hear this anymore. And today we're hoping that this episode gives you some clarity around where is this coming from? What might my body be asking for? And trying to tell me, and how can I then volley back and forth, understand what it's asking, and then respond to it. And there's lots of different ways that we're going to get into that today. We're going to talk about all the various different entry points for coming into and what contributes to this overarching, overwhelming feeling of food noise that people are having right now.
And if you want to know more about those entry points as well, we did spend a good amount of time talking about that on the last episode too. And just in case you need a little bit of a recap, if you have food noise, there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing like that needs to be pathologized about food noise, although that's what they're trying to sell you with Ozempic and all these different like more natural wellness marketing techniques and stuff about GLP-1s. And the way that you stop food noise from happening is not actually by just taking a supplement or taking a medication. I mean, sure, that will stop it in its tracks, but that's not actually going to make it go away. That's just putting a Band-Aid on the equation as like a temporary fix. But in the long run, it would benefit you a lot in your long-term health to figure out, okay, what is this and where is it actually coming from? And that will help you a lot in the long term. So that's what we're going to start to go into today.
For sure. Also, real quick, I want to also note too that even if you're on a supplement like that or a GLP-1 or any of these medications that are being marketed as helping food noise and you're feeling a huge respite from that, I also want to tell you that this is still relevant for you. You can still get so much information around what your body is trying to tell you and what it was trying to tell you even while you're on it, because, we still have to eat. We still have to decide what we're going to have. And we're not completely going to have like this magical thing where people really do want is where you just don't have to think about it anymore. Like if I had $1 for every client of mine that says, I just don't want to have to think about food anymore. I don't want to make these decisions about food. I don't want to think about it anymore. Well, unfortunately, we still have to. So even if you're in this, place, we hope that this episode takes some of the overwhelm out. It makes you feel educated and understand what exactly does my body need and how can I respond to it. And it's relevant for everybody, whether you're on a GLP-1, not, or considering.
Yes. So we're going to talk about 5 common sources of food noise. And we also wanted to say going into this that this is much more of like a massive Venn diagram than it is different columns that you'll fall into. I don't know anybody who only ever falls into one of these. It's more like these are very interconnected, and most likely you're going to find some semblance of seeing yourself in all 5 of these categories, but it may just depend on like the day, the hour, the minute as to which is the kind of prevailing food noise that is happening for you. But again, we always are coming into this with an aspect of like curiosity and understanding and compassion of knowing that, yeah, every single person has food noise. There isn't anything wrong with you because you have food noise. And we want to understand where this is coming from And as Christina always says, try to start to learn the language of what our bodies are trying to tell us. And so then we can do something with that information. And we're also going to talk about, okay, well, now that you have the information, what can you actually do with the information if you want to do something about that? I think that's probably going to be more in like the next episode, unless we want this episode to be, I don't know, an hour and a half or 2 hours long, which probably not. Probably not. We don't have time for that today. So
I don't think you guys have time for that today. I mean, I think we should take it in bite-sized pieces. Haha. But that's what my that's my thought. Speaking of bite-sized, the first one that we're going to talk about is physical hunger. So when you're actually feeling hunger, welcome to food noise. Yes, you have it. And yes, you might actually be hungry. But you know what's interesting is I think what gets people so confused is a lot of us don't really know what our hunger feels like anymore. And so it's really hard for us to distinguish between am I actually hungry or is this something else or what's going on? And so one of the things that I like to say one of my clients and I when we started talking about this, this has been coming up a lot in sessions. I know that has for you too, but one of my clients and I were talking about this and she said like, is it wrong that I feel hunger? I'm so confused about like what's going on. Is there something wrong with me? And this is what we talked about in the last episode about the pathologizing of hunger and this idea of food noise in a lot of these medications are really designed to suppress your natural hunger cues. But we don't want to suppress our natural hunger cues because we're supposed to eat. You know, we're supposed to nourish ourselves. We're supposed to provide our body with not just nutrients, but also energy and all of the things in between as well. And I think when we talk about physical hunger, one of the areas that makes it so difficult for people, like, yeah, if I'm hungry, I should eat something. And people who feel hunger are like, yeah, that's crazy. What do you mean? You're just like, you don't feel that? Like that seems bonkers. But a lot of people don't. And so if you don't, this can also lead to a lot of confusion. And also, there's so much praise around not eating and ignoring your hunger cues and being able to say like, "Hey, I'm not feeling hungry," and like, "Yay, that's a success," right? And so one of the things that's really important to remember, and this is something that we talk about a lot when we talk about the hunger and fullness scale and things like that as well. If I'm going to give you guys a little tip that usually people are like, "Wait, what?" The number one initial cue that you're hungry is that you start thinking about food. If you're hearing that and low key panicking because you're like, all I do is think about food all goddamn day long, and you're telling me that that means I'm hungry, but I already feel like I'm out of control with around food, and this all feels so overwhelming and everything like that. Welcome to food noise, because if you're thinking about food a lot, there's a difference, and we're gonna go down the break down each one. But if you're thinking about food, the first thing you need to remember is this is my body's natural way of telling me that I need to eat something. I also want to remind you that it's okay to feel hunger. You're supposed to feel hunger, and you're also supposed to eat at predictable intervals throughout the day, multiple times a day. And if you're not eating predictably and consistently multiple times a day and you're thinking about food, it's because you're hungry, guys. That's
hmm
the number one cue.
in fact, if you don't ever feel hunger cues, most clinicians would view that there is a sign is something wrong that we need to figure out what is going on. And
Yes.
that I think is just the crux of why nutrition is so confusing and why we talk about the nutrition jungle and why we talk about all this other stuff is like, why is something praised and normalized on one aspect of the spectrum? And if it happens in another context, it is, oh my God, this is the end of the world. We need to fix this. And where is this coming from? And we need to do something about this. It doesn't, this is where food noise comes from. It's so confusing. Like, why, if a client is coming into someone's office and they're like, I'm literally never hungry in the morning. I'm never hungry at lunch. I have no hunger cues. I have blah, 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 blah. Like, if someone came to my office and said that, I'd be like, "Okay, we're definitely dealing with, like, a hormonal imbalance. We probably have some other issues going on here. Do you have really high cortisol?" Like, I'm starting to run through the things. Whereas if you're going to if you look on social media, it's a glorified, oh, I don't have hunger cues. Oh, I'm so virtuous. Oh my God, this is so great. Or if you're starting to do Ozempic or another GLP-1, and then you start to have less hunger cues and less food noise, it's like, oh my God, the medication is working. It's really confusing, right? And there's no shame behind that. Like, one thing we will continue to reiterate is we very much operate from like a harm reduction standpoint on this
Mhm.
podcast and in our practices. And we're not saying that like doing a GLP-1 or considering going on Ozempic or whatever is like the worst fucking decision you could ever make possibly for your health. We want you to go in with informed consent of like, this is what this medication is. This is how it could potentially benefit you. What are you looking to get out of it? And also, we need to go in with knowing all of the potential side effects that we know about at this point. And really, the key phrase there is that we know about, because this stuff is so new that we don't really know the full context of like what it potentially can do long term, right? And so I just wanted to give those disclaimers in there because it's confusing of why is hunger being praised in some contexts and then in other contexts it's like, well, hold on, wait, there's something wrong with
Yeah.
you, and
It
the vice versa.
No, it is, and it does lead to so much confusion too, because you're right. When we go and look at influencers or we look at what I eat in a day post and we're like, "Oh my god, they eat so much less than me. Why am I still so hungry? I'm eating so much more than them." And we get all these like these start panicking, or we don't feel hunger and we're like, "Oh wow, cool. I eat less than them. So that's fantastic. This is wonderful news." From a clinician standpoint, when I hear that stuff, I'm like, "Ooh, this doesn't sit well." Like, "Ooh, we need to dig a little bit deeper." And one of the things that I note with my clients, especially my eating disorder clients, is when they start having hunger cues back, that's something that we all collectively, me and them, praise and get really excited about. We're like, "Oh my god, guys, this is really wonderful." That means
Hmm.
your body is responding to the food that it's eating. It's letting you know when it needs to eat again. This is really exciting. And that means that your hormones and your body are starting to work well. And so, newsflash, if you're obsessed with hormones and wanting to make sure your hormones are balanced, girlfriends, start eating. Like, that is foundation number 1.
Yeah.
So that's, like, an interesting thing, and I think that for a lot of people, the concept of physical hunger is so complex and so difficult to identify and relate to and not feel shamed about. And then other times it feels very glorified. It's very confusing. And so we just want to start off by saying physical hunger is one root of where this confusion's coming from. And if you're listening to this for the last 3 minutes, you're like, yeah, I'm feeling confused. That's because of all of this, right? This
That's
contributes.
because it's confusing.
That's because it's confusing, and it's also contradictory, right? Your body's saying one thing, like thinking about food, coming up with what you wanna eat, fantasizing about meals, thinking about all this stuff, thinking about where you wanna go on your next date night and all this stuff, fantasizing about food, thinking about your next meal and where it's gonna come from, and at the same time, you're thinking, "Oh my god, I'm not supposed to be thinking about this. Why am I so obsessed with food? Oh my god, there's something wrong with me. I am addicted to food." It's like, no, it's just base camp 1, what we need for primal survival. And we
Hmm.
forget that because a lot of the outside noise that we're hearing is contradictory to what our body is asking for. And that's where the confusion comes from. It's not because of like your body's thinking about food. Like when you hear that now, you're going to be thinking, oh, I must be getting hungry. I must be starting to be thinking about where my next meal's coming from. And then if you're not used to that, you're going to be thinking to yourself, "Oh my god, I'm not supposed to be thinking about this." The outside noise is you're not supposed to be thinking about food, and you're like, "Oh my god, my body's thinking about food. There must be something wrong with me." And yet we never consider that the something wrong is the outside noise.
Not the inside thing.
Not the inside thing, not your own intuitive knowing in your cool ass body having all these cool hormones, telling you when and when not to eat and how much to eat and losing your hunger fullness skills. That can't be possibly right. Our science, internal science that's been going on for oh, years can't possibly know what it's doing. But that influencer, she knows the hell of what the hell she's talking about.
Oh yeah,
It's
with all her
bonkers,
degrees.
right?
Yeah.
It's kinda bonkers, but that's what
Yeah.
contributes to the food noise. So,
Yeah.
that's, like, one area that we really wanted to make sure that you wanted to talk that we wanted to make sure that you heard and understood that it's normal to feel hunger, you're supposed to feel hunger, and that's a sign. thinking
That things are
about food,
firing on all cylinders.
that you're like using your body, you're using your mind, you're using energy. This is fantastic. You need to be doing that. Before we get into some of the other ones, I was thinking that right now it might lead nicely into the restriction and obsession loop.
Yeah. I mean, I think the being confused about hunger and learning to distrust your body's internal cues in favor of listening to what you quote should be doing and like externalizing or outsourcing that can really feed into that restriction obsession loop. And this plays into some of these other things that we'll talk about of like a preoccupation with rules or shame, because one of the biggest causes of food noise is trying to not eat when you are hungry, right? Like ignoring a body signal and a very primal body signal, like Christina was saying. And when you restrict yourself, whether that's actually restricting yourself and not allowing yourself to eat certain foods when you are hungry, or what we call mental or psychological restriction of like constantly thinking, oh my gosh, I shouldn't be eating this. I shouldn't be eating this. I shouldn't be eating this, which can come, sure, from all these influencers. It can come from medical doctors. It can come from functional medicine. It can come from other practitioners that you've seen. It can come from somebody random down the street holding a sign. It can come from anywhere. When you're trying to hold yourself to all these different rules, in a way, you're kind of taking your body away from that intuitive knowing. And then we've been talking about this since the dawn of this podcast of like when you restrict yourself and when you continue to restrict yourself for whatever reason, there's always a pendulum swing to the other side of when you get into this binge cycle. And then you swing back to the other side of, oh my gosh, I've been so bad. I can't believe I did that, right? Binges are uncomfortable. We've talked about this on the podcast before. There's many different reasons why you may go into a binge or emotional eating or anything like that. But the one through line is that does not feel good. You don't want to experience that again. And if the only way that you think you know how to get out of a binge is by making plans to restrict yourself even more the next day, the more you're going to fall into this continuous vicious cycle of what we call the restrict binge cycle. And we see this over and over and over again with our clients. And we have been there ourselves. We've talked about this on the podcast before, but it's a really, really hard place to be. And it's even more difficult because you think you're doing the right thing. Let's say you go to the doctor and they're like, oh, you have high cholesterol. You need to do XYZ. You're like, cool, I'm going to do XYZ. I also found this like really cool supplement and I found this protocol out there. I'm going to do this for 30 days, whatever. You start following the rules that you think will lead you to have better cholesterol or fill in the blank, whatever it is. And then a couple days in, you're like, I don't know about all this, but like, what about that stuff I used to eat? What about this? And like, I really, oh my gosh, I'm craving this, XYZ, whatever. And you cannot stop thinking about that thing. Because let me tell you, as soon as you tell your body you can't have something, guess what you're going to be thinking about until you have that thing again? Probably that thing that you are not letting yourself have. And it feeds into this restrict binge cycle, which is one, worse for your health than actually just existing and being, let's say, more moderate most of the time or whatever you want to call it. And it's just really, really hard to get out of. So we hear you there.
Yeah, one of the things that kind of ties the physical hunger back into this restrictive and obsession loop is think about it this way. If physical hunger, if thinking about food is a sign of physical hunger and you are consistently restricting food, even if it's not your whole dietary intake, but it's types of food or certain types of food or things like that, when you are thinking about food, that means that you're hungry. And if you're restricting what you're eating, what is thinking about food going to start to feel like? It's going to start to feel obsessive. I joke around with my clients, I'm like, your pantry's not talking to you. Whatever the hell is in there is not talking to you from the pantry. That is all in your mind. And it's because you've given those chips power over you. That's what's happening here. And that's what that's stuck in that restrictive and then that obsessive binge like cycle that we can fall into is that we are then feeding into this. We're pulling away from not allowing ourselves to eat those things, feeding our physical hunger because we're not feeling satisfied when we go and eat. And therefore, when eventually you pull in that opposite direction, like the pendulum, when you pull in that opposite direction, at some point, it's like your body is like, "I can't do this shit anymore." And it just swings in the other direction. And we, in a way, it's so difficult because, in a way, it's like this weird confirmation bias because we go ham on that thing that we've been like the pantry item that's been like speaking to us from the beyond. And we're like, oh my God, it's talking to me. And you're like, no, it's not talking to you. And it's like, yes, it's talking to me. And I can't control myself around it. And then we get it and we go completely bonkers on that item. And we get this confirmation bias that, oh, it is the item and it is me, and I can't control myself around it. But if we learn to stop pulling on the pendulum in the other direction, we will slowly, eventually, when you stop pulling on a pendulum in any one direction, what happens? It just naturally kind of ebbs and flows between the center, which is what all of us kind of want our relationship with food to feel like, but we're like, we
Mhm.
must control this by doing these things. And then it makes us feel like we are obsessed and thinking about these things and these foods all the time when, one, we could have been hungry, and two, we could be restricting something that we really like because of enter nutrition confusion information overload here that feeds into I shouldn't be having those things. I'm not allowed to have those things. And then here we go. Now we're living in this place of standing in front of the refrigerator being like, well, I can't eat this thing. But you know what I can do is I can make this weird Mod Podge of things out of stuff that I feel safe eating and turn it into this little thing, but it's not as satisfying, right? It's like this weird feeling.
Yeah. 2 points here. One, if you listeners have ever said or thought, I can't keep this in the house because I'll eat it all, you
Uh-huh.
fall into this category.
Yeah, this is you.
Everybody has fallen into this before. But the other thing that is, speaking of, oh, this feels scary, like Christina was saying, it is that confirmation bias is you truly feel like, and given this, if this has been your pattern for a while, this would happen to you, is you feel like, well, if I keep that in the house, then I continue to keep it that in the house to try to challenge these food rules. I'm just going to eat those potato chips like all day, every day, and I'm never going to stop. And my cholesterol is going to be bad, and I'm going to gain weight. I'm going to be the worst person ever. And it's just like these intrusive thoughts that keep happening. And you might even see that happening to yourself. But the reason that keeps happening is not because of the chips. It's because you still think that you should not be eating those things for whatever reason. And so even though if you are constantly challenging that food rule by allowing yourself to eat those things, you still think that you shouldn't be eating them. And therefore, you're still in that restrictive mentality of, I'm not allowed to be having this, even if you're still eating it. And this is where we talk about the difference between like physical restriction and like psychological or mental restriction.
Mhm.
You're eating that food actively. So that's not a physical restriction. Like, in a way, yes, you're allowing yourself to have that food. But if you still keep thinking, this is the worst food ever for me, or like, I don't know, Dana Cristela told me to do it, I don't know if I should keep doing this. Like, you keep second guessing yourself, you're just going to keep binging on that food because you don't believe that it should be part of your food plan. And listen, the disclaimer here is we're not telling that you should be eating potato chips and McDonald's and donuts and bonbons and whatever 6 times a day and that's all you ever eat. Of course you're not going to feel good if that's all that you eat, right?
Yeah.
If that's all you have access to, then that's the food that you have access to, right? But the difference here is trying to learn to listen to your body's cues, not rely on this outsourcing of nutrition information and just shutting down every cue that your body has, and learning to diversify your plate in a way that allows you to have foods so that they are no longer forbidden fruit. They no longer have that power over you. You don't eat the chips and the McDonald's and the donuts and the bonbons 6 times a day anymore because you know you're allowed to have those foods and they don't take up brain space anymore. This is way easier said than done. I just summed that up in like 30 seconds. It takes people years to do this.
Totally. One of my clients, I'll never forget this, they were deep in this type of thing too, and they were talking about a lot of people are. You're not alone. Like, so many people are deep in this. Unless you've gone through this work, I almost feel like you can't get out of this unless you
If you have ever Googled intuitive eating, you are interested or you are in this work,
and
okay,
if
which is
you've
like the
read
most
intuitive eating, you're like, "That shit's insane. How would I ever do that?" Because all I intuitively ever want are donuts, bonbons, and chips.
you're in this phase, yes.
Listen to this episode. This is for you. You're here and you're not alone. You're just in it. And so the idea of intuitive eating feels completely asinine. Like, to be honest, it's like, what is this insanity? Um, but one of the things that I was thinking about is one of my clients, I remember we were working together for a long time, and we talked a lot about mental restriction. I remember them saying, like, "I can't have that in my house. Like, I cannot allow myself to have that." And then, slowly we've been working on, like, "It's safe for me to eat these foods. It's okay." We started having this stuff, and then all of a sudden, they came to me and they're like, I bought the thing, and I forgot that it was there." And I was like, "This is it. It's not talking to you from the pantry anymore because we're not obsessed with thinking about it. We're not steeped in the rules and shame about even having it in the home that you can forget that it's there and not think about it. You can actually take a serving that feels authentic and right for you and your body and then put it away and move on with your day and not having it speaking to you from the beyond. And that is amazing. Like, that is such a freeing feeling for so many people.
Speaking you to you from the beyond is sending me every time I
Every time you start laughing, but it's true. It feels like it's talking to you from the beyond. Like, this chips can't talk to you, but yet we feel like they're like, "Eat me, eat me. You can't handle eating me. You know you love me. You know you want it. Oh, you know you want that French onion dip with me. You know you love me. Gossip girl. XOXO, the potato chips from your pantry. No one's ever gonna love you if you eat these." It's not saying that, guys.
It feels like it though.
It feels like it though, right? It really does. And the thing that is interesting about all of this too is these things that we pull back from, the things that we restrict, we binge, the things that we create rules and shame and guilt around, we become preoccupied about and we become obsessed with as well. And then we feel like it's like talking to us from the beyond and we can't decide what to eat, how to eat, what we're allowed to have, what we're not allowed to have. And the truth is so much like basically all of this all comes down to information overload. We call this the nutrition jungle, and this is one of the other sources for where the food noise enters the world and enters your brain. Because
Mhm.
I actually remember talking to this is years ago, when we first kind of came up with the concept of the nutrition jungle. I remember talking to a client of mine and them saying like, "Christina, I sometimes feel like I'm just standing in front of the refrigerator. And when I look at the food and what I'm gonna eat, all they hear is this contradictory dialogue going in their mind about how to build their plate." And they're like, "God, I just came in here to get lunch." And I hear this, I'm like, "Well, I shouldn't have chicken because it's like, it's whatever, like, it has this stuff in it, I might add but I like the dark meat, but that's gonna add to my cholesterol, I'm gonna do this instead." Or like, "Oh, I wanna have rice. Oh, resistant starches are good. Oh, but the carbs." And then it's like, "Oh, I wanna do this thing." And I'm like, "Oh, I don't have any vegetables in here. I have to have vegetables with this thing. I have to do these things." And it's like all this stuff ends up coming, and we described it as, like, them standing there and being like, "Well, it's easier just to walk away." Close the refrigerator and forget about eating or go grab a bag of popcorn and call it a day and say, "I'm not gonna eat." And then you feed into the physical hunger. Then you're continuing to think about food. You're becoming preoccupied about it. You're feeling guilty that you didn't have lunch. And it just feeds into all this stuff. And it really comes down to we are fed so much contradictory nutrition education. I'm putting education in air quotes for the people who are only listening because all it does is lead us to more confusion so that we can't even make a decision about what to eat, and we feel overwhelmed by the process of feeding ourselves. That is why we lead down this road of feeling obsessed with food, thinking about it all the time, not being able to make decisions, and why we start off by saying, "God, I would love nothing else but then to just not have to think about food."
Yeah,
It's
for
like,
somebody to just, like, tell me
"Tell
exactly
me what to
what to
eat,"
do so I don't have to think about it anymore.
which is why we love diet so much. because it tells
Not
us what
us,
to
but
do.
the
Not
people.
us, but, like, in general, like,
I know.
that part of you. That part of
Yeah.
you loves diet so much, right? Because it gives this respite for that too,
Oh,
and
because the decision fatigue around food is gone because the decision has already been made for you.
exactly, it's done. It's so funny too because there's so many reels. One of the things that I end up the algorithm sends me are these videos of, like, I didn't know that, like, for the rest of my life, I was gonna have to make breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's like, we're all collectively feeling this. If you have children, it's even harder because not only are you supposed to be making decisions about what you're gonna eat, you're also making decisions about what your kids are gonna be eating too. And everyone's, choices and likes and dislikes and all of the different things that it leads to so much decision fatigue that we just get overwhelmed and we don't wanna do it anymore. I think at this point, a lot of people don't even know what is healthy.
Yeah.
Or, like, they think about it and they're like, "I don't even know where to begin." Or I've said
Mhm.
that to clients before. I remember maybe it was my brother. My brother was like, "Oh my gosh, I would love to hire you to meal prep for me. That'd be so amazing." And I remember me being like, "Oh, it'd be fun. Like, what kind of food would you want?" He goes, "Oh, anything healthy." And I go, "You're gonna have to narrow that down." And I said, "What's healthy to you?" And he goes, "Oh my god. I think it means this." And, like, he even in that moment was kind of like, "What is like, I don't know. What is that?" Because there's so
Mhm.
much information out there, and it does become so overwhelming, and it leads us to a lot of decision fatigue. It also then leads to physical hunger. Do you see how this, like guys, do you see
Yeah.
how the loop just, like it's like you fall into these things. It's like, no wonder we're all like,
Mhm.
"God, I don't wanna do this anymore."
Yeah. So if you don't even know what healthy is anymore, or if you are I wish somebody would just tell me exactly what to eat and how to prep it and all the things, this is probably your main category.
Yeah.
And the other thing that can happen there is when you have so much nutrition confusion from information overload and you like don't even know what healthy is anymore. And so you're trying to figure out like what even is healthy? Where is all this stuff coming from? That if you then go too long without eating or eating satisfied meals, this is where stuff like scavenger eating comes in,
Mhm.
which we talked about over the summer. This is where binge eating can come in. And maybe this is your entry point into the restriction, obsession, binge cycle that can happen
Totally.
sometimes too.
Yeah, and especially also too, it's like yes, 100% it could lead you into that because, if you're gathering what we think is little nuggets, especially if you're someone who values your health, and most of us do. Like most people, if you talk to them, they're like, "Yes, I value my health." The problem is that everyone has different definitions for what that means, but most of us have a value of that, right? And we value, wanting to take care of our bodies and our minds and nourish ourselves and all the different things. But the problem that can get kind of overwhelming around it is that we'll start off in this place of being like, I'm gathering like what we think are just, oh, there's a little reel with a little nugget of like what this person is saying. Or, hey, I watched this Netflix documentary and it told me this thing. By the way, guys, don't ever watch a Netflix documentary about food. Just stop. It's all,
Unless you wanna see someone eat a poop smoothie.
and God, I totally forgot about that. That woman harvest poop from her boyfriend.
Harvesting sounds wild, Christina.
That's how she described it. It's like, "No, girlfriend, you were digging his poop out of the toilet." Like, this is just sorry, guys, this is really gross. Um, it's a
We did a whole
documentary.
episode on that last
It
year.
was about GI stuff. It was just, like, wild things I do not do, and it was a documentary. But anyways, they weren't saying not to do it in the documentary, just just so you know. But one of the things I will say about Netflix is if you're watching Netflix documentaries like that or any other one or anything like that, or you're absorbing these nuggets of information, whether it's through a cookbook that you're reading or a diet or a food blocker that you like, everyone has their own food noise and food beliefs that they're throwing at you all the time. And we think, and they think too, innocently enough, like, oh, this is just like my own personal experience. And I'm going to share these little nuggets of information that I have. Some people are trying to capitalize it. Some people are not trying to capitalize on it. They're just sharing little nuggets. This happens at the Thanksgiving table. This happens every Sunday at family meals. People just throw out these little nuggets of things. We absorb them. They get stuck in our mind. And then we think to ourselves, I need to absorb this as fact. I need to execute on this because I care about being healthy. This documentary says that this is unhealthy and that these behaviors are healthy. So if I don't do those behaviors, I need to absorb that and I need to do that. And then we're like, wait a minute, but I don't like those foods anyways. And then we're left feeling like, okay, now I'm going to feel guilty about not liking something that's supposed to be quote unquote good for us. So, like, oh, I should be eating this. And then we feel guilty about it, which also then leads to the shame and guilt that we have around food. And we're like, oh no, I feel like crap about myself. It's because of all these little nuggets that we've been collecting, we've been carrying around, putting on our little backpacks as we're walking through. And they weren't ours to carry. And they're
Mhm.
just someone else's little weird food shit infiltrating your own little weird food shit, right?
I
We're
mean,
all absorbing
yes.
this stuff and then we're carrying it as if it's our own. And I don't think we ever question enough. Do I even want to listen to this? Is this even applicable to me? And
Do I
just
even wanna drink celery juice? Because the answer is absolutely not.
no, it's McNasty.
Celery in general is McNasty.
You hate
I
celery.
don't
I love celery.
I don't care what health promoting benefits celery has. I'm not eating it.
I know, right? It's like I'll eat
And
something
that
else.
is my decision. That does not have to be anybody else's decision. That is me and my dad, apparently. We're the number one celery haters.
You guys are celery haters. I love celery. I love it. Little ants on a log. I know Dana's face right now is hilarious. Anyways, this
If
is a
you're
great.
watching on YouTube, you get that. Unless Christina screenshots it and shares it with you all on Instagram, which she's been known to do. So
If it's a really good one, I'll do it. Okay. So I think you guys get this whole idea around the nutrition jungle and how information overload can leave us feeling really overwhelmed by the decision of food. And then also how it can have this, like, almost this trickle down effect to feeling physical hunger and then stuck in the restriction obsession loop and then becoming preoccupied with food, with rules and shame and how it can feed into that. The other area that we really wanted to talk about today, too, that I don't want to leave you guys with without talking about is emotional hunger. Emotional hunger. This one is tough.
we are going to do an entire episode on not just emotional eating, but the capitalization of emotional eating and combating emotional eating as a business model. We are going to do a whole
Whoa.
episode about that.
Oh, yes, we have to.
Coming up soon. Coming up soon. Because yeah, that has been something that a lot of people have tried to pitch to come on the podcast to talk about as
Mhm.
guests. And it's kind of like when we always used to get these I am a dietitian people who wanted to come on, but like they're actually just giving you diets. Like none of them are actually non-diet and none of them are actually neutral around food. There's a parallel here with emotional eating and emotional hunger that we're going to talk about. But today we want to talk about how food is inherently emotional and it
Mhm.
always has been. And this is a perfect example of when we were talking about before. Why is this paradox with hunger of like sometimes it's a bad thing and sometimes it's a good thing? It's the same thing with emotional hunger. Why is food a means for celebration when you get promoted, when you have a birthday, when there's a family celebration, when there are holidays, when something good happens, when something bad happens, when there's a funeral? What do? You bring people food, right? It's a way, food is a way that has always been a way to bring people together. And
Mhm.
so all of a sudden, and actually, no, it's not all of a sudden. This has been a very diet culture thing. It's like, oh, you're sad and you eat horrible for you. You're going to gain weight and be alone forever. And it is okay and normal to eat emotionally sometimes. And we just want
Mhm.
to give you that permission slip because if you never ate emotionally, then you would never eat at any of those events that I just described. What we want to also talk about, though, is that in your large toolbox of coping tools, you don't want food to be the only coping tool that you have for your emotional needs. And if that is the case, then that doesn't mean that you should never emotionally eat anymore. It just means we need to diversify the toolbox. So Do you want to talk about how we can identify some emotional hunger signs, Christina?
Yeah, I feel like they're sometimes kind of hard to find, to be honest, and hard to identify for a lot of people because sometimes it happens retroactively. Like they can look back on it and notice it. I've noticed that with a lot of my clients with really classic binge eating disorders. What sometimes it feels like it happens to you rather than, and sometimes it also feels like it's preemptively planned and being like, I'm having these big whatever. Sometimes people can't even identify what their emotions are with it. And what they'll notice is all of a sudden I've had, you know, I've ordered like 3 dozen wings and I'm like, "Oh my god, what just happened?" Right? And this can happen on anywhere on a spectrum, right? It doesn't have to be like that in order for it to be bingey like feelings and it be emotional hunger type of reaction that your body's happening that can be feeding into your overall food noise. But the way that I look at this, which I feel like is more identifiable than it is around the concept of calling it hunger, is restriction. I think of emotional eating as emotional restriction. When we aren't allowing ourselves to feel our feelings, or like Dana's talking about, we might be able to feel them, but we're like, I don't know what to do all with this. So I'm going to take it out on this ice cream, which, yes, sometimes wonderful choice. Love some pints of ice cream. I've actually sat across from my therapist before and said, I know that what I'm doing is emotional eating. And I know that this is going to stop and I'm going to have other tools in my toolbox. But right now, this is where I'm at and I'm not taking it away. This is what I want. I want this ice cream. I'm going to have it every single night because it makes me feel good. And eventually, I'm going to work through this. Now, for many people hearing that, they're like, Christina, that is insane. I would never feel comfortable with that, or that would give me so much anxiety. But the truth is, this is because of emotional restriction. We're not allowing ourselves to feel the things that we're feeling and so we don't know what to do with that, right? It's like that perfect Jennifer Lawrence meme, like, what do you mean? It's like the perfect
On Hot Ones?
yes. And it's like this perfect example of like, well, what do you mean? I have to feel my feelings. Well, there's lots of ways you can feel your feelings. You can cry, you can get movement in, you can do these things, you can allow yourself, you can talk to a friend, you can journal. There's all kinds of things that we can do in order to allow our feelings to process through us. But as we've said, eating is inherently emotional. That so for so many of us, it's also so easily accessible and easier to do than actually allowing ourselves to feel it. So we lean on food to help us cope with the things that maybe we're too scared to talk about or that feel too big for us to even, we don't even want to say it out loud, you know? And so we lean on these things and it's really difficult because then we feel so ashamed of our behavior that we were already feeling pretty shitty beforehand. And now we've just piled it on. And so the idea around emotional hunger, to me, I've always looked at it as how am I restricting my emotions right now? And am I leaning into these things? That's why I mean by like retroactively being able to look back on it is because sometimes it feels like, well, this is what I do. This is what I do after a fight with my boyfriend, or this is what I do after my mom and I get into an argument, or this is what I do after I get an A on a test. I go and I get a bunch of donuts and I enjoy myself and I reward myself. Like, this is what I do. And we don't really look to say, like, is there another way that I can process those feelings that I'm having? That's why I always call it emotional restriction because I find it to be
Mhm.
the most accurate of like, no, I actually am restricting myself emotionally, and I'm using food naturally and understandably as a way to cope with those feelings, and it's really hard to
Mhm.
do. That's why I feel like it's so hard to get out of sometimes because it's
Yeah.
really vulnerable, it's really uncomfortable.
Yeah, and there's all this demonization around emotional eating
Totally,
when really, as we've just talked about, and as you just mentioned, you get an A on a test, your parents take you to go get ice cream or something.
totally.
Then why is it bad that if you go through a breakup or the world is on fire and you don't know how to deal with this, that then you're going for ice cream? It's the output or the ending situation. is actually exactly the same, but the way that you feel is completely different. It's, oh my gosh, I deserved this because I did something good, versus like, how did I let myself do this again when I just couldn't deal with these overwhelming feelings? That is the only difference there.
Totally.
And that is what makes it so hard, because there's so much shame around the latter option and absolutely no shame around the former option, even though you could be eating the same thing in the same quantities.
But it
Again,
also
confusion.
But totally, and I think at the same time is why do we shame ourselves for going for something that helps us feel good when it is the thing we go to feel good when we're celebrating something? With the reason
Mhm,
why we're leaning towards these things when we're having a very emotionally vulnerable moment is because it's comforting. We're going to it because it feels good, because it makes us feel happy. And we don't want to feel the things that we're feeling and when we're feeling really low. And so we lean on these things that feel good, taste good, and make us overall kind of happy. It gives you a little nice little dopamine hit. But it definitely feeds into this overall food noise that we're living with because, and you could see how quickly this, again, with the cascading, right? Like, because like we said in the very beginning, this is one complicated Venn diagram web of crap that all feeds into each other. But the cascading, right? If you might be starting in one, but you can cascade to all of them, right? You're starting off with emotional hunger, and then you can really quickly cascade into preoccupation. You can also really quickly from there cascade into restriction and obsession. You could then cascade into physical hunger. Like it's so easy how they can all feed into one another and leave us feeling like I can't trust my body. I can't trust the what my body's asking for and how it's asking for things. And that's just simply not true. We just haven't been given we've been given so much noise and so much confusion around what we should and shouldn't be eating or how we're supposed to be interacting with food and our body that we have forgotten that everything is right here. And the more that we provide the blueprint for how to interpret that information rather than running away from it, the food noise just gently starts to unravel and have less control over you over time.
mhm.
And instead, you're left with like, yeah, you might still be left with food indecision because sometimes I can't decide anything else for the day, right? That's different than I can't make a decision about what to eat because I don't know what's good for me to eat or what I should be eating or what I'm allowed to eat, what might trigger something or how I'm going to feel afterwards, not just physically, but also emotionally, how you're going to feel afterwards. Very different from I can't decision today anymore versus I'm gonna walk away from the refrigerator even though I know that I'm hungry and it's been a long time since I've eaten, but I can't make a decision because all of this noise that's coming into me about how I'm supposed to eat. It's a huge
Mhm.
difference, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So we hope this has been helpful for you all in trying to figure out, where is your food noise coming from and how do you start to interpret it? We're going to go into this more on the next couple of episodes in this series also. But we hope this has been helpful and that you realize that the answer to not having food control your brain space is not to just like shut it down,
Yeah.
right? It's like we need to learn where it's coming from so we can start to sort through it. And once you're able to use those tools to start to sort through it, that's actually how you have less food noise, not just shutting it down, not even at the root of it,
I'm
of
just
just
gonna
putting a band-aid on it.
shove this in the box. Let's not be boomers, guys. Don't throw things in the box and pretend it doesn't
Unpack that
exist.
box.
Let's open that box. Pandora's here. We're here to help you unpack it, and we're gonna help you. We're all gonna get through this together.
Yes, and we would love to know what questions you have on
Mhm.
this episode. So go leave us a comment on Instagram at Millennial Body Image Project. You can email us at millennialbodyimageproject@gmail.com. You can find us on TikTok. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on all the
You
places.
can
And
also
then we'll see you
comment
next
on
time.
Spotify directly on under this episode and ask those questions in there too. I don't know if
Oh,
everyone
yeah,
knows about
that's
that.
true. Hmm.
All right, guys.
Yeah, and then
Oh,
next time we're going to be talking about how when feeling full feels unsafe and what you can do about it.
ooh, guys. Ooh. It's gonna be good.
Bye, guys.